Imagine stepping through a low wooden doorway into a haze so thick you can taste it. The scent is a heady mix of ale-soaked wood, roasting meat, and the unwashed musk of dozens of bodies packed shoulder to shoulder. The light is dim, coming mostly from a large fireplace at the far end and a scattering of tallow candles dripping wax onto sticky tables. Your ears are instantly assaulted by a clash of noise, clinking mugs, the off-key wail of a bar in the corner, and the constant hum of shouts, laughter, and drunken boasts. This is no romantic fantasy in from a storybook. This is a real medieval tavern, and you've just stepped into its chaotic heart. In the Middle Ages, the tavern was far more than a place to get a drink. It was a heartbeat of local life, where farmers fresh from the fields rubbed shoulders with merchants discussing trade, soldiers boasting about their last battle, and wandering travelers swapping strange tales. People came here to escape the cold, the boredom, or their troubles, and they often left warmer, louder, and poorer than they intended. The tavern keeper, often shrewd and sharp-eyed, knew everyone's business and controlled the flow of drink like a king dispensing favors. To be on their bad side could mean watered-down ale, higher prices, or a seat near the drafty door. The drinks themselves were the main draw, and while ale and beer dominated, they weren't the same as what fills your pint glass today. Water was often unsafe, so even weak ale, brewed with low alcohol, was a daily drink. But when you wanted to forget your worries, there were stronger seasonal brews that could hit hard after just a few mugs. Imported wines, sweet mead, and cider added variety, though they were luxuries for most. Brewing wasn't standardized, so every batch tasted slightly different, sometimes pleasantly rich, sometimes like a mouthful of sour bread. A pint was never exact. The size of your cup depended entirely on the generosity or greed of the tavern owner. Getting drunk here wasn't a quick process, unless you were drinking the strongest stuff. For most, the journey into drunkenness came through a constant cycle of drinking, toasting, and refilling. Social customs encouraged overindulgence. When someone raised a mug in a toast, you were expected to drink with them, and refusing could be taken as an insult. Drinking games, challenges to finish a horn in one go, or wagers on who could hold their ale the longest kept the cups flowing. You might arrive intending to drink lightly and leave unable to walk a straight line, all thanks to the relentless rhythm of medieval hospitality. The tavern's atmosphere was a living, breathing thing. The air shimmered with the heat of the fire and the noise of overlapping conversations. The floors were uneven, the tables sticky from countless spills, and the smell of pungent mixture of spilled ale, damp cloaks, and whatever was roasting in the hearth. Dice clattered in shadowy corners where men gambled for coins, scraps of jewelry, or even livestock rights. Card games, primitive compared to modern decks, were played with fierce concentration. In one corner, a bard sang for coins or drinks, his voice occasionally drowned out by cheers or groans from a gambling table. On another table, someone might be carving a wooden figurine while half listening to a companion's drunken story. Fights were inevitable. Maybe a man accused another of cheating at dice, or someone bumped a table and spilled a drink on the wrong person. These weren't duels fought with honor. They were messy, loud brawls involving fists, mugs, and the occasional bench swung like a club. Tavern keepers tried to keep order, sometimes by breaking up fights themselves, other times by letting trusted regulars act as muscle. A well-timed threat or a sudden dousing of cold ale could sometimes cool tempers. But the fight got too wild. The offender might find themselves literally thrown into the street, nursing both a bruise and a wounded ego. Of course, all that drinking needed fuel. Tavern food was designed to keep you drinking longer, hearty, salty, and filling. Thick vegetable stews, hunks of dark bread, roasted meat dripping with fat, and wedges of cheese were common fare. In wealthier establishments, you might get spice pies or sweet puddings. In poorer taverns, salted fish or beans were more likely. The saltiness made you thirsty, and the heaviness slowed the effect of alcohol just enough to keep you going. Even so, after enough mugs, you'd feel the world tilting no matter how much bread you'd eaten. Entertainment kept the crowd lively. Music was the most common. Simple melodies everyone knew the words to, sung loudly and without much care for pitch. Storytellers exaggerated tales of daring knights or foolish peasants to roars of laughter. Some taverns hosted mock trials, where patrons would play judge and jury to humorously accuse a fellow drunkard of ridiculous crimes. The accused would then be sentenced to finish their drink or sing a song in front of a crowd. These games kept the night from turning into just a slow slide into unconsciousness. As the night wore on, the line between fun and folly blurred. Your senses dulled. Your laughter grew louder, and you started believing the tall tales told by the man across from you, even though you'd heard him tell a completely different version last week. The fire's glow softened the rough edges of the room, and the mug in your hand felt like an extension of your arm. Somewhere in the corner, two men were arguing about who had the better plow, and at the far table, a group was howling over a bawdy song about a farmer's daughter. You could smell the ale on your own breath and feel the heavy warmth of it in your veins. By now, some patrons were asleep at their tables, heads resting on their folded arms, while others still clung to their mugs like treasures. The bard had stopped singing and was quietly counting his coins, glancing around for one last drink before leaving. In the corner, a serving girl laughed loudly at a customer's joke, even though she'd heard it 3 times already tonight. Outside, the streets were dark and cold, but inside, the tavern was a little island of heat, noise, and the strange camaraderie that only comes when strangers share too much drink and too little space. As you sway in your seat, you realize the night is far from over. There will be more toasts, more songs, perhaps another fight or two. Somewhere between your next drink and the one after, the rest of the world will fade away, leaving only the warmth of the fire, the noise of the crowd, and the feeling that, for tonight at least, this noisy, smoky room is the center of the universe. And when morning comes, you'll pay the price. But for now, that's tomorrow's problem. The night in a medieval tavern rarely ended with polite goodbyes. It ended when you either stumbled out into the dark, passed out where you sat, or were unceremoniously dragged to the door and dumped outside. The wooden floor was littered with crumbs, the air heavy with the lingering stench of smoke and spilled ale, and your head felt heavier than your own body. You might tell yourself you'd only had a few drinks, but the blur in your vision and the unsteady sway in your step told a different story. And then, as the firelight dimmed, the real consequences began to unfold. Morning in a medieval world offered no mercy to the drunk. Hangovers were harsh punishments all on their own, and there were no painkillers or fizzy remedies to soften the blow. If you were unlucky enough to wake in the same spot you'd been drinking, the cold air of dawn bit your skin as the tavern keeper kicked your boots to rouse you. Your mouth was dry as parchment, your stomach churning, and your head pounding like a blacksmith's hammer on iron. The most common cure? More drink. Some swore by swallowing raw eggs mixed into wine. Others chewed bitter herbs or sipped weak beer until their hands stopped shaking. The wealthy might send for spiced wine infused with cinnamon or rosemary, claiming it warmed the humors. The poor simply endured, muttering that the devil had slept in their skull. The tavern was never entirely safe, and drunkenness made you a target. Pickpockets moved like shadows through the crowd, their hands skilled enough to slip a coin purse from your belt without you noticing until it was long gone. Dice games had turned into subtle scams, with weighted cubes that always seemed to favor one side. A clever serving girl might flatter you into buying her drinks all night, only to vanish before the bill was tallied. Some tavern owners watered down their ale for those they suspected wouldn't notice, charging the same price for a weaker brew. There are even tales of entire taverns being fronts for thieves, where the drink was just bait for unsuspecting travelers. If you got too drunk and too loud, the law might take notice. Public drunkenness was sometimes tolerated, but repeat troublemakers faced harsher consequences. You could be hauled to the stocks, left a mockery of passers-by until you sobered up. In smaller villages, the constable might throw you in a cold, damp cell for the night. Some towns imposed fines for brawls that spilled into the streets, and in others, alehouses were taxed heavily to curb excessive drinking, though these taxes mostly just made tavern owners creative in hiding their barrels. Drunken soldiers were infamous for pushing boundaries, their status often protecting them until they caused damage too costly to ignore. The drinking customs themselves could be as dangerous as the drink. In some places, toasting required that you drain your cup completely, no matter how full it was. Refusing could be taken as an insult, leading to heated words or worse. Competitive drinking matches could stretch on for hours, with participants collapsing in their seats. Cups were often communal, passed from one person to the next, each sip carrying the risk of spreading sickness. And then there was the ale stake, an unmissable sign outside a tavern signaling that fresh ale was ready, which could draw an instant crowd and kick off drinking that lasted well into the next day. Taverns were also fertile ground for a quiet business of the shadier kind. In the dim corners, you might overhear whispers about smuggling runs, stolen goods, or meetings between rebels plotting against local lords. Outlaws could slip in under the noise of a busy night, arranging deals over mugs of ale. Spies sometimes used taverns to gather rumors, blending in as harmless drinkers while listening for valuable scraps of information. Love affairs often began here, sparked by flirtation after one drink too many, though not all ended well. Some unions were the start of lifelong partnerships, others ended in heartbreak, or worse, a duel at dawn. On festival days, taverns became riotous whirlwinds of activity. Feast days brought in people from miles around, swelling the room beyond its usual limits. Brewers prepared special Alish and spice wines. Their recipes guarded secrets handed down for generations. Patrons came in costume, singing, dancing, and playing games that blurred the line between celebration and chaos. In winter, your ale flowed freely, its heavy sweetness keeping the cold at bay, while in summer, fair day drinking spilled into the streets, turning whole towns into drunken carnivals. It was both the best and most dangerous time to be inside a tavern. Tempers flared quickly, pockets were easily picked, and the line between friend and foe vanished in the haze of drink. For all the laughter and camaraderie, overindulgence had a dark side. Alcohol poisoning was poorly understood, and too much strong brew could stop a heart before anyone realized the danger. Accidents were common. Drunken patrons stumbled into open fires, fell from horses on a ride home, or wandered into rivers under moonlight. Fights that began with shoves could end with blades drawn, leaving wounds that no amount of ale could mend. And a ruined reputation was no small thing. Being known as a drunkard could cost you trade deals, land opportunities, or a chance at a good marriage. Yet even in this chaos, there was a softer side. Romance bloomed under candlelight, with mugs clinking in playful toasts. Courting in alehouses was common among the working class, where a shared jug could lead to whispered promises. Serving women were as much a part of the tavern's identity as the drinks themselves, remembered not just for their work, but for their wit and presence. Proposals were made, some earnest, others ridiculous with drink. Some were accepted, many were rejected with a laugh, and a few sparked tales that would be told for years. As the night's end drew near, the tavern keeper would make the final call for drinks. The fire was banked low, shadows stretching across the room. Patrons drained the last of their mugs, some swaying as they stood, others leaning heavily on friend for balance. Outside, the streets were dark and cold, lit only by flickering torches and the pale wash of moonlight. A few voices still sang in the distance, carrying old drinking songs into the night air. Inside, chairs were pushed back, mugs stacked, and the last embers cast a faint glow on a room that, in a few hours, would be scrubbed clean for the next round of revelry. If you found yourself there, you'd feel the pull of that warmth and noise, the strange bond formed between strangers over shared cups and slurred laughter. But you'd also know to pace yourself, to keep one hand on your purse, and to remember that in a medieval tavern, the night never truly belongs to you. It belongs to the drink. And in that world, the drink is always the one in control.